welcome to another edition of the SABC News COVID-19 Global Wrap, where myself, Babalole Phaka, and my colleague Busisiwe Khatebe bring you highlights of stories which dominated news headlines with regards to the coronavirus pandemic. But before we delve into it, let us have a look at some global stats. The world currently has over 151 million cases, with over 128 million recoveries and over 3.1 million deaths. South Africa has 1,579,536 cases, with 1,504,426 recoveries and 54,331 deaths.
Staying in South Africa, government resumed the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in its Sisonke trial on Wednesday. Government had paused the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine after cases of rare blood clots were reported in 6 recipients in the US. Meanwhile, the South African Health Products Authority says recipients of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be informed of the possibility of developing extremely rare blood clots. On to the rest of Africa. The continent has now recorded over 4.5 million COVID-19 cases, with more than 4.1 million recoveries, and the death toll stands at 121,848. The Democratic Republic of Congo has begun redeploying hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 vaccines to other African nations. On Thursday, the country's health ministry said it won't be able to administer the vaccines before they expire at the end of June. The Orange Foundation is providing an additional 1.3 million euros in financial aid to 17 countries in Africa and the Middle East to help fight the COVID-19 pandemic. The funds will be used to support national efforts to vaccinate as many people as possible and to help combat the health crisis and its effects. And lastly, the African Union on Thursday warned African states about COVID-19's devastating effects. The AU says the raging state of the COVID-19 pandemic in India is a wake-up call for Africa. It says African governments and citizens must not let their guards down. Head of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, John Kengasong, says African nations generally do not have sufficient numbers of healthcare workers, hospital beds, or oxygen supplies. He says the continent of 1.3 billion people would become overwhelmed should it face similar issues to India if cases surged in a similar way.
And in international news, in the United States, fully vaccinated people can safely engage in outdoor activities like walking and hiking without wearing masks, but should continue to use face coverings in public spaces where they are required. This comes after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention offered new guidelines for people who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 in the country. According to the CDC, just over 29% of the US population had been fully vaccinated as of Wednesday, while 43% had had one dose of the 2-shot vaccines. The CDC called the new guidelines as a first step in helping fully vaccinated Americans resume activities that they had stopped because of the pandemic. In South America, Colombia hit a new record of 490 daily reported coronavirus deaths on Wednesday. This was on the same day protesters from the country's biggest unions went out in numbers to demonstrate against tax reform proposals. Unions insisted Wednesday's demonstrations would go ahead despite a court order to postpone them based on coronavirus concerns. Intensive care units in Bogota are more than 90% occupied, while occupation in Medellin hovers near 100%. Meanwhile, Brazil is on the verge of registering 400,000 coronavirus deaths this week. The country's COVID-19 crisis has spiraled out of control in recent months, with patchy restrictions on circulation and a highly contagious new virus variant driving infections. And according to a report published by Government Biomedical Institute Fiocruz last week, younger Brazilians are increasingly being infected by COVID-19, with those in their 20s showing the greatest increase in deaths so far this year. In Asia, India's total COVID-19 cases passed 18 million after another world record number of daily infections, reporting 379,257 new infections and 3,645 new deaths on Thursday. The world's second most populous nation is in deep crisis, with its hospitals and morgues overwhelmed as healthcare professionals struggle to cope with streams of patients. Gravediggers are working around the clock to bury victims, while hundreds more are being cremated in makeshift pyres in parks and parking lots. Meanwhile, the United States is sending supplies worth more than $100 million to India to help it fight a surge of COVID-19 cases. The country is also receiving aid from Britain and Singapore, China, Russia, Italy, and Germany. And finally, in Europe, the European Commission said on Monday that it had launched legal action against AstraZeneca for not respecting its contract for the supply of COVID-19 vaccines and for not having a reliable plan to ensure timely deliveries. AstraZeneca said in response that the legal action by the EU was without merit and pledged to defend itself strongly in court. Under the contract, the Anglo-Swedish company had committed to making its best reasonable efforts to deliver 180 million vaccine doses to the EU in the second quarter of this year, for a total of 300 million in the period from December to June. But AstraZeneca said in a statement on March 12 it would aim to deliver only one-third of that by the end of June, of which about 70 million would be in the second quarter.
For the latest updates on the coronavirus, visit sabcnews.com.